Hi, everyone. It's Kate Johansson here, and we're doing a series with the theme of pre-kindergarten puppy classes. So you can't really, most people are not going to take their puppies to a pre-kindergarten, pre-puppy class because the puppies are subject to being exposed to things that we don't want them to be exposed to. And so normally classes are going to start around 4 months for puppy classes. And by that time, it's not too late, but you've missed a lot of really great opportunities. So when puppies are born, they're changing so much every single day. It is unbelievable. So the first day, with a Labrador Retriever puppy, they're like this big. And the next day they're this big, and they just grow so much, and their looks change every day, and their brains change every day. And when my puppies are born, I'm right there to catch them. And the first thing that happens is I break the sack and I put them on mom right away. So the very first thing that they experience when they come into the world is me. And then I'm with them a lot. I spend a lot of time just stroking them and holding them. And when they're first born up to about 3 weeks, they really don't want to be held. They squirm a lot. But by the time they're 4 weeks old, they really enjoy it. And so their brains and their bodies are changing tremendously every single day, like probably hour to hour. And so the more they can learn when they're first born through about 12 weeks, the more imprinting is going to be done on the puppies that will last them a lifetime. And bad habits are really hard to break, but good habits are really hard to break too. So when I got my Australian Kelpie out of the shelter back in 2007, she was 9 months old, and she had a few issues, but I went in there, I had a list of the things that I wanted from the dog I was going to get from the shelter. And I want a dog that I specifically did not want a lab because I already have labs. And I need dogs, though, that will fit in with my high drive labs. And I want a dog that has sparks flying from their toenails. They're excited. They love to play. They come with all the warnings at the shelter that only experienced people should have this dog. Those are the kind of dogs I want because I can turn them into great performers. And so when I saw her, she was jumping up higher than my head and just bouncing up and down and barking right in my ear. Look at me, look at me. And she was really trying to get my attention, and she was in there with 2 other dogs in that same kennel run at the Humane Society. And I went and got one of their leads, a slip lead, and I got her out and took her into the evaluation room, and I had brought some toys with me. And I threw a ball. Before we even got to the evaluation room, she was grabbing onto the leash and doing this play growl. Arr, arr, and she was shaking and tugging me so hard that I was like being pulled backwards because she wanted to play tug. And this is a really high stress environment. She'd been in the shelter for like 20 days. And I don't know how somebody else didn't get her. I have no idea. But I was just there at the right time, and we connected, and it was love at first sight for me because she loved to play. And even in that super high stress environment, even though she'd been there for 20 days, she wasn't letting anything get her down. And when I threw a tennis ball for her, she ran and got it and just pounced on it. And then she came back by me, and then she was going to play keep away, which is fine. Just the fact that she had all that drive and excitement about playing, that's all I cared about. And so she's been with me ever since. Spanky, where are you? Spanky. Spanky, come here. I'm trying to get her over here so you can meet her. She's going to be 10 this year. Here, no, that's not Spanky. Are you coming? Yeah, come here, baby. Let me put these puppies back. I don't know if you know what a Kelpie is, but they're a cattle dog, a livestock dog from Australia. That's why they're called Australian Kelpies. And they're really common in New Zealand as well, of course. Spanky. No, you're not Spanky. Spanky, come here, baby. Come here. Come on, get up here. Come on, show everybody your ears. Come on, all the way up. Say hi. Say hi. Spanky. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, say hi. So you probably can't see her ears. She's got them back because she's being goofy, but she's growling at the other dogs. But her growl is always a play growl. She's smaller than a Labrador Retriever, but super powerful dog. And they're bred to, run livestock, herd. And they're also adapted for the really hot weather over in New Zealand and Australia. She has a really thick coat, which helps insulate her from the heat. Spanky, come here. But I thank the universe every day for Spanky's upbringing. Whoever bred her, obviously I can tell because they spent a lot of time with her when she was first born and through their portion of the first 12 weeks. She was found as a stray wandering in Roy, which there was a breeder down in the Yelm area. I believe it was Yelm. And so there were several Kelpies that came into the shelter right about that same time or were adopted by people. You know what, Craig, you don't have to have a good mic. The people that have the really good mics are the ones that have feedback, it seems like. If you just have speakers on your computer, you can call in, but you don't have to, no big deal. But if you would like to, you're welcome to. So, and if we do have feedback, then we'll just deal with it. So the breeder is really, really important. So I have learned the hard way over the years that I really want to make sure if I'm going to buy a dog, I don't care how great the pedigree is, I don't care how many national field champions this breeder has bred, if the breeder isn't going to have the dogs in the house with them, I don't want to buy a dog from that breeder. I want the dogs to be raised in the house. And people have this attitude that their dogs, that their puppies, puppies are dirty or puppies are too much trouble. So we're going to build a kennel run for them to be in, or we're going to build a special house for them, or we happen to have a storage shed outside and we'll rig that up and we'll fix it up all really nice and we'll let the puppies stay out there. But the problem with that is they aren't getting the constant exposure to stuff that's going on in the house. They're just isolated and they're not getting that exposure. So my puppies are born in a little bathroom at the top of the stairs, right in the middle of all the bedrooms. And the comings and goings of everybody and all of the other dogs and the cat and all of that is happening the whole time that they're growing up. They miss nothing. They miss absolutely nothing. And they're right there. So if they cry, if they're beating up on each other, which mine are 5 weeks old now, so they're starting to really do that. I can look in on them and talk to them. And my puppies, even before I've really started feeding them regular food, I guess you would say. I'm feeding a mixture of commercial food and really rare liver, both beef and chicken. And I'm going to be introducing them to raw turkey necks because I want them to be able to eat either commercial food or raw. And I really encourage everybody to feed raw if they possibly can. Because raw is, if you read about it and you study it and you read all the stuff that people have said, especially the vets that have actually turned into holistic veterinarians because of what they saw with the raw, all of a sudden they have this epiphany that maybe if you go with what Mother Nature intended, you're going to have much healthier animals. You're going to do a lot better. So dogs that have really severe skin conditions, the first thing I tell people is get those dogs off grains. Do not be feeding grain, ever, ever, not even rice. Because once I got it through my thick skull that even rice was causing skin problems, ear infections, and just itchy skin and stuff like that, dogs are not genetically selected to eat grains. They can, they're scavenger carnivores. So they can eat just about anything, but a regular diet of grains is not good for them. So that's the first thing. And then if you're still having problems, the commercial food is filled with toxins. The high heat that it's cooked in to make it like that causes, sorry, I just got a text. I wondered if it was somebody trying to get into the lab. So the high heat causes the food to become carcinogenic. And it's just not the best thing to feed them. And if you read about what's in the food, what they put in there, think about how these companies are trying to make a profit. That's their job as a corporation, is they have to make a profit. And the only way you can make a profit is to cut your costs or increase your price. And increasing your price is going to cause problems. Fewer and fewer people are going to buy it. So what do? We're going to cut costs. And when you read that on the ingredients that there's chicken byproducts or whatever kind of byproducts, you have to really think about what is that. Somebody said, I asked that last week of somebody, and they said, I don't know, chicken feet? No, that would be chicken. Chicken feet would be chicken. Bones would be chicken. So chicken byproducts are like chicken excrement and maybe feathers, although I think feathers could probably be classified as chicken. So what are chicken byproducts? And it's kind of scary. So, and then the preservatives that they're using to preserve this stuff, it's just not real good. So if your dog is having problems, and then their teeth, when people switch to raw, they notice that the dog's teeth clean up. I'm here to tell you that. If you're feeding raw, especially, on a regular basis, bones and all, their teeth are not going to have the plaque on them. So if you don't want to be spending your whole life trying to brush your dog's teeth and send them to the vet to be put under anesthesia and have their teeth cleaned, then feed them raw, and you're not going to have that. So going back to the raising of the puppies, once you get your puppy from the breeder, and hopefully you picked out the right breeder, although a lot of people get their dogs from the shelter, and that's fine, but just know that whatever work hadn't been done by somebody, you are going to have to work 3 times, maybe 10 times as hard, as fast as you can, as soon as you get that little puppy, to try to make up for lost time in order to get a bond established with the dog. So I recommend that if you're going to get a dog from the shelter, that you not get a puppy. You wait and you get a puppy that's over 6 months old, because if you do that, when you evaluate the dog to see whether you want to take the dog home and make it part of your family, you can tell by the dog's temperament if somebody had taken the time with it as a puppy. If you get a 9 or 10 month old or 10-week-old puppy, you don't know whether the dog spent the first month of its life in a culvert under the road. And I use that example because when I was working at a kennel in Southeast Texas, the owner had this beautiful piece of property, 38 acres, and you came down this long driveway off the highway, and they had a beautiful kennel that housed about 150 dogs. And one day the mail lady came down the road, and she informed me that there was puppies running all over the road right outside the driveway. And it turned out that the dog that had the puppies belonged to the people that had the ranch across the highway. And the people that had the ranch across the highway hadn't even been home for 3 weeks, and they just let their dog forage for food. They didn't bother to have anybody feed her. They didn't get her spayed, and this was actually her second litter of puppies that she had had. And the puppies were about 3.5 weeks old when the mail lady came and told me that they were there. So these dogs had not had any human contact at all. And I learned that the previous litter of puppies had been adopted. Some of them had gone home with some of the workers at the kennel, and every single one of those dogs had to be given away to somebody else because they did things like kill the people's chickens, because they saw their mother having to hunt and kill things in order to feed herself and feed them. And they were feral dogs. They were not they hadn't been socialized. So if you get a puppy from the shelter like that, you have to be really, really careful. Make sure you know where they've been, because if they've been in that feral state at the very beginning of their life, it's going to be really, really hard to have the kind of bond that most people want with their dogs, because there's always a distance that's never going to be filled. So that being said, can they be trained? Can those dogs that were feral to start out with be trained? Sure. I mean, people kidnap whales from the Puget Sound here and take them down to Florida or wherever, and they train them to do tricks. So can they be trained? Yeah. Wild animals get captured and brought into zoos and shows and stuff. Elephants. Can they be trained? Yes, they can. But you're never going to have that super close bond. And I can tell the difference between even a super pedigreed Labrador Retriever that has field champions and national field champions all through the pedigree. If they were raised in a kennel outside, away from the house, I can tell the difference between that dog and a dog that was raised in somebody's house. It's palatable. So your job, our job, when we get the puppy, hopefully from the kind of circumstance that we wanted it, our job then is to take the dog and continue on with the good job that the breeder was doing. And that means that we're going to spend time with the puppy. We're going to spend as much time with the puppy as possible. And it doesn't matter if, in your case, Lou, if it's you, your wife, your kids, everybody can participate. And the more participation there is, the better it is. Now, you have to let the dog rest. And if the dog's getting overstimulated, you know, you don't want to do that. But you can do great things if everybody just spends, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Spend time doesn't mean spend a lot of time, like hours, but every hour you stop and you play with the puppy, pick the puppy up, I told you, Lou, to get paint rollers. So my goal when I got your email, I'm going to explain for everybody who might be listening to this later. So this is something I see. People are so excited to get their dog, and they start picturing what they want the dog to do, in this case, to hunt. And so they're just so excited. They're just chomping at the bit. Can't wait to get started. And they just can't wait for that month to go by before they get their puppy. And so to fill the gap, they're looking at Gun Dog Supply in Missouri and Gun Dogs Online and all the different, places that you can buy equipment. And, God bless you guys. It's great, because I'm so glad that you're excited. But really, you don't need that stuff to begin with. Just make a wish list or get it and set it there and, put it in a case and look at it. But you don't need anything but yourself and a few little toys. So I mentioned to get a package of paint rollers and stick a string through there and tie a knot and use those for bumpers in the house. So for little puppies, it's really easy to grab onto that paint roller because they're soft and it's not going to hurt your furniture throwing it around. The dog might hurt it by bumping into it, knocking it over or whatever, but just try not to do that. And then leashes. I hate leashes. I hate leashes all the time, but my favorite leashes, if I'm going to use them, which I do for puppies, is to go to REI and get, I'm listening to one of my puppies crying outside. I'm trying to see if I need to go attend to her. But get 8 to 9 milliliter, thin, but too thin. So you don't want it to be too fat. It's hard to handle. And if it's too thin, it's going to burn your hands. But 8 to 9 millimeter is perfect. And you want to get the kind that has some give, just in case the dog's running really fast and gets hung up around a bush. There's just that little bit of give. And it's wonderful in your hands. And it won't burn your hands if you get the right size. Leashes, the nylon leashes that you get at the big box stores, those things burn your hands and they'll cut your hands. And the biothane leashes, I really like that material, but it always comes with a loop that's sewn and that loop's going to get caught on bushes and things like that if the dog's running through cover. So just don't tie any knots in it, and just get at the store, get the little leash hook. I'm sure they're used for all kinds of other things. To me, they're just leash hooks, but they're hanging all at the hardware store on the wall. And just take and thread the climbing rope right through the end of the hook and tie it off with a bowline knot. And that's the kind of knot that everybody should know. It's the one that you would use to pull your car out of your ditch. It's a really, really strong knot. It releases super fast, super easy when you push it. But when it's being pulled, it won't come undone. And I burn it off with a torch or a lighter or something like that, and burn the ends so that they don't fray. But those are the nicest leashes. I love those. I'd rather have those than anything, pretty much. And so when you start to take your dog out on walks, you don't ever give your dog a command that you can't enforce or that you can't make happen. So you always want to have your dog on a leash, even if you're letting the dog kind of wander a little bit. So when you call your dog, you want to make sure that you can go stand on that leash. And a lot of times when they start retrieving, and they're about 9 or 10 weeks old, you'll throw something for them, and they're outside and they're having a blast, and they'll grab whatever it is, and then they'll run kind of back towards you, and they'll run right past you. And especially if it's a bird that you got out of your freezer, a lot of times they want it for themselves. And so they'll try to go hide in the bushes, and they'll be chomping on it, and you can't get them. But if you have that line on them, as they run by you just step on it very casually, just super easy. Don't do anything scary to the dog, and you just go over and you just step on it so that it doesn't leave. And then you just casually bend down and grab it, and you just pull hand over hand, slowly, not anything jerky. You just pull hand over hand, pull them out, and tell them what a good dog they are. So name it and claim it. So even though they didn't really bring the bird back to you, when they get back to you, whether they dropped the bird or they kept it in their mouth as you were reeling them in, you want to praise them for being there. So you want to name the behavior that you're wanting. It's kind of like using a clicker. So you don't need a clicker if you know how to mark things with your voice. So good dog. Just always use the same thing and let them know how much you appreciate it. And they're going to start getting the idea that you really like that behavior. And they basically want to please us. So if you don't have anything to throw, take an old shop rag, tie a knot in it, throw it. You can throw that in the house. You can throw it outside. You can also play tug of war. So a lot of people don't want to play tug of war with dogs that are going to be hunting dogs, because the feeling is amongst many trainers is that if you teach your dog to tug and bite on things, they might do that with the birds. My experience has been totally different than that. If I play tug of war, they know when we're playing tug. So Spanky, the Australian Kelpie, the herding dog, she got a lot of tug when I first got her. She did some Schutzen training, some protection training. So she was really, really encouraged to bite. But at the same time, I was also doing all the trained retrieve stuff with her, just like I do with my retrievers. And she does the T pattern. She goes out, I send her out to a pile. I stop her on a whistle. I cast her over here. I cast her over there. She runs big old blinds across big ponds. She's really my pickup dog. And I'll tell you, when I was down in Texas, we had all these Labrador retrievers, and we were shooting ducks. And one of the ducks flew back towards the trees, which they always do. And down in Texas, it's so hot and humid that you have to set up your whole training scenario with the gunners in mind. Otherwise, you're going to have a revolt. So you have to set everything up in the shade of a tree. The gun stations have to be in the shade, or the people will just be dying out there, and they're not ever going to want to come back and train with you. So you have to keep people's comfort in mind, and that's not good for birds. So when they throw the birds, I always ask them to step out, the gunner and the thrower to step out as far away from the tree as they can, and, you know, throw the bird and shoot it and then step back into the shade. But a lot of times the birds will curve back around and they're trying to get to cover. They want to live, right? And so this bird did exactly that, and it flew over the barbed wire fence into the neighboring ranch property. And it was the ranches down there in that particular area of Texas. They started out these huge ranches, and then generation after generation, they've been split up. So everybody that owns a piece of property just about is related. And these are two brothers that own these two pieces of property. So I didn't feel weird about, you know, going through the barbed wire and going over to get the bird, but I wanted the dogs to do it. And so we tried retriever after retriever, go get it. And they didn't even want to go through the barbed wire. And Spanky, my Australian Kelpie, was just having a fit. She was in the front of my truck when, of course, the windows were down. And she was just having a fit. And she finally couldn't stand anymore. She jumped out of the truck, ran under the barbed wire, and got the duck out of the cover, which was really thick at the bottom of this tree, and brought it back through the barbed wire and handed it to me. And I turned around and I said, it's a good thing we have a livestock dog here to go get the birds, because our retrievers don't want to do it. So anyway, but Tug, it hasn't hurt. She has the softest mouth. When she has a live animal or a dead animal, she never ever tries to hold on to it. She hands it and she releases it. So it's all about the training. When she has a tug toy, she doesn't release it. She wants to tug. So they're really smart and they know the difference. So Lou, I've just been talking, and Craig, if you have any questions, type it in or come on and ask your question. And Lou and your family, do you guys have any questions at this point?
Can you hear me without the distortion?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, we were just talking. So we get I got your email. We were going to get some rope and do that. Well, I wish we would have talked to you like when we got our first dog about 14 years ago. We had a problem with her. She would run away, and she'd let us get within a foot or two, a couple of feet of her on the dog beach, and then she would just bolt. So, no, I think we got it. And thanks. I got your email about the supplies and whatnot. So, and yeah, we'll start with the rollers for the puppy bumpers. But cool.
Yeah, I mean, and soft toys. I mean, the silly, you think they're silly. They look like little kids' toys, you know, they love that octopus thing, you know.
Yep.
They're hanging and they love that. So any excitement you can create in the puppy about doing things with their mouth is really, really good. And like I say, if you don't have the money to spend on that, then just use, or you just haven't gotten there yet, just use anything. Use a shop towel. You grab an old towel and tie a knot in it and just do that. Anything you can grab is good. So yeah, I was kind of playing around with you on that. I was trying to think, what can I do to keep him busy while he's waiting for his puppy? I was trying to give you things that you had to go to the hardware store and then come home and figure out how to tie a bowling knot and all that stuff, so that you'd have something to do while you're waiting for your puppy. I was trying to medicate a little bit, give you some alternatives. But yeah, and so going back to the idea of, I'm sorry, I'm rocking back and forth. I'm trying to get my shoe off. Going back to the idea, so when they're first born in those first 12 weeks, imagine a bell curve, and those first 12 weeks, every day they're changing. They literally look different from one day to the next. Their brains are totally shaping and changing. And the more attention you give them in the beginning, the better. Because if you don't give them the attention, they're going to suffer. They're not going to have that super awesome, it's like with a human baby. You put them in a crib and you want to hang all kinds of things for them to do with their eyes and look at. You don't want them to just sit there and stare at blank walls, right? So you want to work the brain as much as possible. And you want to, of course, this should go out without saying, but you know, everything's super positive. One of the mistakes I see people doing with retrievers, or a pointer, which is also a type of retriever, is saying, throwing the toy and then saying, fetch, 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 fetch. And then the dog doesn't fetch because the dog's not trained. Don't do that. So you throw the toy, the dog runs over it. Good dog, good. So imagine you're training your dog with a clicker again. You're marking the behavior that you want. You want to name it and claim it. So the dog runs over to the toy that you just threw. Good, good dog. And you want to act like you just won the lotto when you do that. Sure, it would be nice if the dog would pick it up. I have pictures on my Facebook. My Facebook avatar is my little Misty 2 years ago when I got her. She was 10 weeks old and we were out shooting ducks and I said, what the heck? I'm just gonna walk her down the hill a little bit closer to the gun station and I'm just gonna lift up her front feet and I'm gonna just let her go see if she wants to get a duck. And sure enough, she ran down there. They didn't shoot the duck for her, but they shot and threw, and it was a brand fresh duck. Like it had only been retrieved once, I think, maybe twice. So it was still really fresh and a beautiful duck. And it was as big as her, it seemed like. And so I have pictures. That's my avatar, is of Misty running up the hill with this duck that was so big that its feet and its beak were kind of dragging on the ground because she was so little. But she brought that thing all the way up and she literally delivered it to hand. That was amazing. Now, is that going to happen with every dog every time? No, no. That was just like a fluke. So that it doesn't mean anything if your dog doesn't bring it back when they're 10 weeks old or 12 weeks old. It doesn't mean anything, trust me. It doesn't even mean anything when they're 5.5 months old. If they go out, they find the bird, they sniff it, and they don't pick it up. It's frustrating. It can be frustrating because you want the dog that's going to pick them up. But if they don't, you still stay positive because you haven't trained the dog that they have to retrieve it yet. So you want to keep letting them know that going out and finding the duck and putting their nose on it is a really good thing, or the pigeon, or whatever or the bumper, whatever you're using to train. So I'm going to circle around back to puppies again and talk just a little bit about house training. This is the #1 call that I get, and it's the #1 reason why cats, even more so with cats and dogs, are surrendered to the shelter and euthanized. Because people do not want to do what they need to do to house train a dog. So we use a crate, and people say, I don't want to use a crate, that's cruel. It's not cruel. It is not cruel to use a crate. Dogs are naturally denning animals, and as puppies, they want to be in a small, dark, tight space. It's instinct. So my 5-week-old puppies, when I put them out in the yard to eat, once they've eaten, they start looking for where are we going. We've got to get out of this uncovered space. So they're going to go under the deck. I've got some plywood leaning up against a fence, and it's literally about maybe a foot. When they go under there, it's about a foot wide, and it's about 2 feet wide the other way. And it's a small, tight space, and all 8 of those puppies squeeze in there and pile on top of each other. I'm not putting them in there. That's where they want to be. I've also got a dog box out there, so sometimes they all go in there and pile in there, and as they get bigger, that's probably where they will be, because that smaller space is going to be too small for them all to get in. But when they're born and the whole time the litter's together, they're always piling on top of each other. So I can literally take a really tiny kennel, which is what I did today when I drove out to to Issaquah and Fall City. I put them in a crate that most people would think is too small for them. It's barely got enough room for each of them to have their own space. And I did that because I know they don't mind. They're fine with it. And they're much less likely to have an accident. They're much less likely to soil in there because they're feeling peer pressure from their siblings not to mess that space up. if they were to mess that space up, they would all be very unhappy. They would be protesting madly. So it's instinct. So a mistake that people do also, in addition to not wanting to use a crate, well, okay, I'll get a crate because I know the dog's going to be this big when I get my puppy, and I'll just go get that because I don't want to spend money on a little crate if I have to buy a big crate for when they're bigger. If you do that, then the dog is able, this little puppy is able to say, this is where I sleep over here in this corner, and way over there across this Taj Mahal crate is where I'm going to go potty. So don't do that. And then people say, okay, well, I'll get one of those that are divided. I'll get one of those folding wire crates that I can divide because they come with a divider. And they claim this is great for training dogs, for housebreaking dogs, because you can divide it and make it smaller. The wire crates, unless you cover them with something, they're not small, dark, tight spaces like the dogs want. So they don't feel secure in there. They're fine for moving around the house. Like if you want your dog to be with you when you're in the kitchen and you want to set the crates outside the kitchen where they can see you, and you should do that. But not for sleeping and not for being alone in. You want to have a nice, tight, dark space. So I prefer the plastic airline crates because the dogs prefer that. And so if you get a small crate, I'd say even a medium size is good, a smaller medium size. And then just, if you start out with the small, you know that you're going to probably want to get a medium in a month or two. So if you can afford to do that, that's the best way to do it. Just as the dog grows, keep trading up. And people just fight that. They fight it, because again, they're picturing their dog as a grown dog. They're picturing this wonderful relationship that they're going to have or that they want to have with their dog. And they want that right when the puppy first arrives. You don't do that with your children. We don't do that with our kids. When the baby is born, the baby is treated a certain way, and we bring them along. And if we're good parents and our parents are helping us, and the people that we have in our lives are helping teach us about how to raise the kids, we learn all kinds of things about what to expect with a baby. And when the puppy is 4.5, 5 months old, they're about the equivalent of a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old child. You wouldn't go to the store and leave your 2.5-year-old toddler wandering around in the house free to do whatever they want. They're not able to handle that. It's dangerous. You don't want to do that with your puppy. I tell people all the time, if you keep the dog either in a crate or on a leash, or maybe in your lap is even better, at all times until they've earned the right to be out of the crate and to be more on their own. So at about 5.5 months of age, I'll start experimenting. I'll let the dog have a little bit more freedom. If they start having accidents, they're not ready. And a lot of times the males take a little bit longer than the females. It's pretty much the same with every species, including humans from what I've observed. So the males are going to need to be crated longer, but certain females too. If you let them out, you do a little experiment and they're not able to handle it, boom, they're going right back into that. You keep the hatches battened down a little tighter to make sure that you have that success. And people fight this like crazy. And again, it goes back to, well, I picture this wonderful relationship with this wonderful dog, and the violins are playing and the pixie dust is falling and and the butterflies are flying and everything's beautiful, and that's what I want right now. You have to do the work in order to get that. You're not gonna get that without some work and some time invested. And people are uncomfortable having their dogs in the crate because they hear other people saying, well, isn't that cruel? Isn't that cruel? And they feel this societal pressure to not do that. But if you will do that and really be super regimented about it, you're going to get through the eye of the needle a lot faster, where on the other side, through the eye of the needle, the pixie dust is falling and the violins are playing and the butterflies are flying. So just crunch it down and just get her done. Just get her done, okay? Ruby, who's now 6, my chocolate lab, when she was a puppy, she wasn't pooping and peeing. That wasn't a problem, but she had this bizarre desire to get any of the comforters that were on any of the beds that had that stuffing in them. She would go make a little hole that you could hardly figure out where it was, and then she would pull the stuffing out of the comforters. She ruined, I don't know how many, like 5, 6, and I was out of comforters, and I threw a down comforter on the bed, and you know what happened then, right? I come in and there's feathers just everywhere. And at that point, I'm just like, gosh darn it, Kate, what are you doing? You know better than this. And so back in her crate she went, and it was, you know, a few more months. And then I did a little experiment again, and she was okay. And she stopped doing that. And then from there on, she was able to be out of her crate. So questions, anybody? Are you guys still there? Okay, so I don't know if you're there. I'd love to hear from you if you are.
Hey, I have a quick question. We were going to keep the kennel upstairs in one of our spare rooms, and I work from home a lot, but I'm on conference calls, and I work for a tech company, so I'm looking at software and things like that. Anyway, if we have them in the kitchen, you said those, not the actual airline kennel, but those other deals that they have, the wire mesh ones, are those okay? As you know,
yeah.
If I can't pay attention to them, just something like that, right? To keep them.
He needs to be kenneled. So if he's in the kitchen or just outside the kitchen when you're in there washing dishes or making dinner, that's fine, because he's going to feel like he's part of the family. But for times when he needs to sleep, or you know, he needs to just have some chill time, he needs to be in a small dark space.
Oh, so, yeah, I got that, but I meant the we have the kennel. We're going to have the kennel, but I meant if he's, you know, if I'm working and I'm on a conference call, those wire mesh, or the wire.
Or should we get 2 plastic ones?
Should we get 2 plastic ones, or have that wire one? If you know what you were talking about there.
If you already have a wire one, that's enough.
Or nothing.
No, we don't. We just we're getting the kennel with the puppy from the breeder. So okay. I was thinking about
sleeping haven.
And that's the sleeping quarters. We were going to leave that upstairs.
Okay. So if you're on a conference call, so I'm kind of on a conference call right now, right?
Right.
Who's climbing up into my lap? It's not my 5-week-old puppies. It's their mother, who's right here, bugging me. Say hi, Tina. She's bugging me constantly to pet her. If I didn't tell you that, you probably wouldn't notice. But right here are the 2 5-week-old puppies, and they're sound asleep. And they're in a medium-sized crate, but I turned it up so that it's upended, so that I could reach down and get them if I needed to. But they wouldn't be able to get it. I didn't have to close the door. So they're right here. They pretty much haven't made a peep. So they're right next to me, and they're hearing my voice, and they're hearing your voice, and they're hearing all this stuff, and they're just sleeping through it. It's comforting to them. So if your dog is making all kinds of noise and, you know, yipping and being obnoxious, then there's a hole somewhere in what you're doing, and we need to talk about it, or you need to, you know, look in the mirror and have a talk with yourself. What am I doing wrong? Because they should be really relaxed when they're around you, and they shouldn't be bothering you with a conference call. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to do that. I was just thinking I should have that one kennel upstairs. We were going to have one kennel down in where I'm doing my work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good to have
better control.
Have them all over the house.
Okay.
Hi, Colin. Colin, do you have a dog, or are you just cruising through the blabs? So it's really good if you have a small kennel to keep your puppy in, you can just pick it up and move it. So you don't even need to have a couple. Something you said though, you were going to keep it in the spare bedroom. You're going to keep the crate and the puppy in the spare bedroom. If he's okay with that, that's probably okay. But I keep all my puppies when I first bring them home. I have them in a little crate and I set them on a chair right next to the bedstand. And if the puppy's fussing because you just took him away from his mother and his siblings and everything he knew, and now everything's different. So if he's fussing, I will literally take that crate, pick it up and put it right in the bed with me and even cover it with the covers. Because they're social animals, they're pack animals, and instinct is for them to be very fearful if they're away from their pack. So I want the dog to be really comfortable. I want him to hear the other dogs breathing and snoring and the heartbeats and, you know, all that stuff and me. And it's part of the bonding process. So, you know, consider doing that. And if you don't want to do it in your room, if one of the kids would volunteer to do it, that would be really good. But you can try it. And if the dog doesn't seem to be bothered by it, it's okay. But if they do seem to be bothered and they're crying a lot, and fussing, then again, we need to look in the mirror and say, what could be wrong with this picture? And we want to, you know, make it as easy for the dog and as successful for the relationship that we're going to have with the dog later. So if we're doing that, so I get tons of calls from people about separation anxiety. Separation anxiety is because people put the dogs in the garage where they're terrified and the rats are coming through. And don't put your dog in the garage because rats do come in there and rats could literally start chewing on the puppy. I've tried keeping birds in the garage for a short period of time and I've had the rats come in and kill the birds. So the garage is not a good place to keep a puppy. So if the dog is having bad experiences being in a crate away from you because you're not keeping them part of the pack, then that could be the beginning of a problem later on. But mostly what people do is they don't train their dog. So we're doing everything backwards, basically. 95% of people, I think, out there, at least in this country, are doing everything backwards with their puppies. So we get this cute little puppy. Oh, what a sweet puppy. Oh, baby. And we're gonna treat it like a baby. But it's really a dog. We know that. So we're gonna let the dog just walk around the house because we don't want to crate it. So we're going to let the dog just walk around the house and poop and pee. Well, that's okay because he's a puppy. We'll deal with it later. He's so cute and we'll just let him. Well, after a couple weeks of that, then things start getting really nasty. And now we're starting to get really worried about the puppy never learning to be housebroken. So now let's put him in a crate. Start right away. Do it right the first time coming out of the gate and don't let the puppy establish habits. So the name of the blab that I said, you know, don't screw up your dog because you're afraid of screwing up. So the famous line, you go to a sportsman show, and I've said this to you before, Lou, but if for anybody else listening, the famous line is you go to the sportsman show and you're thinking about getting a puppy. You talk to the gun dog trainer, the famous gun dog trainer that's there with a booth, and you say, what should I do when I get my puppy? And he says, don't do anything with your puppy. Don't screw your dog up. Don't do anything with your puppy. Just bring him to me when he's about 6 months old or 7 months old, and then I'll train him for you. If you do that, you are shooting yourself in the foot. You're screwing your dog up for the dog's whole entire life. You need to be doing everything you can to get that bond going with your dog right out the get-go. So when we have separation anxiety, it's because we let the little puppy, the cute little puppy, run around the house, do whatever he wanted because he's so cute and little. And we waited because we didn't want to do anything wrong. And we were afraid to put the dog in a crate because, oh, crates are cruel. And then now the dog is 6 months old. Now we're going to shove him in a crate and we're going to go to work for the day. And now we've got what people call separation anxiety. The dog's freaking out. And some dogs freak out so bad they hurt themselves, they tear the crates apart. It's a bad deal. And remember, we're starting with that bell curve. The puppies, from the time they're born until 12 weeks, are learning their brains are growing and expanding, and they're building on everything every day. If you wait until they're 6 months old to start introducing them to the crate, you're going to have problems. Don't do that. Don't do that. So Colin, do you have a dog? Sometimes people drop in and they'll just listen in the background and they're not necessarily, I do it all the time, and people are like, Kate, are you there? And I'm like off on the other side of the kitchen, really busy, and I'll run over with my hands wet and try to dry my hands off really fast to type into the computer on here, because I try to be really supportive when people are doing their broadcasts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people can come and even respond in the chat at all. But thanks, Colin. So Colin says he doesn't have a dog. But anyway, oh, cool. Well, thanks. So Lou and your family, do you guys have any questions? And you might be off too.
No, we're good. We're good. Thanks. I think no, we're going to get the little guy actually the second week in May, and then I guess when would we start the training with you?
We're going to do this. We're going to talk, and I'm recording these so that people can, into perpetuity, can come back and look at this stuff, so that
Gotcha.
5 years from now, somebody that gets whatever kind of dog, I don't care if it's a German Shepherd, a Belgian Malinois, and if they're going to do protection work or they're going to do retriever work, it's all the same. Dog training is dog training, and starting out, the more you can do. So a friend of mine raises Dutch Shepherds / Belgian Malinois, and he is a fantastic protection trainer. His name's Les Flores, and he runs the Cascade Schützen Club, and he's a retired police officer. He's been training dogs for 35 years, and he thinks nothing of just taking his dog down to the airport and getting on a plane and flying over to Belgium to compete in something that's going on over there. He's won all kinds of stuff, but they raise their puppies. They socialize the puppies a lot from the time they're first born, just like me. They're catching the puppies as they come out. Their little boy is absolutely interacting with the dogs as much as possible. They have a little agility course outside in their yard, and they play with the puppies. They go out in the yard and they play with the puppies and encourage them to go over the dog walk and climb up the stairs and go through the tunnels. So when you get a Belgian Malinois from my friend Les, by the time the puppy's 8 or 9 weeks old, the puppy like knows how to do all this agility stuff. That's so cool. And so those dogs, yeah, they have the breeding, they have the pedigrees that are crazy good, but they also have that early education where their brain was just able to just build and build and build and gain all that confidence. So that is huge. And if you don't have agility, an agility course in your backyard, that's okay. Take your dog up and down the stairs. Get those paint rollers and play retrieve. Put a string on your paint roller and play retrieve with your dog. Tie a knot in your shop rag. Make sure it's clean and it doesn't have like icky stuff on it. But tie a knot in your old shop rag and play tug with the dog. Get your dog excited. Most retriever trainers are not going to want you to play tug with your dog. I'm here to tell you that it's probably going to be okay if you do. But definitely if you're going to be doing protection, you want to get the dog excited about tug. Everything stays really, really positive, and use your voice as a marker. So name it and claim it. Good dog. When he already is doing what you want him to do, good dog. He goes over, puts his nose on the bird, doesn't pick it up. He's a good dog because he ran over, he was interested in the bird. Good dog. Mark it, so name it, and then claim it. And clicker training, that positive training, is going to work wonders for you before we get to the formal training. So with formal training, with retrievers, all all retrievers that are going to be doing any kind of advanced work are going to be introduced to the electronic collar. It's near impossible. I've never seen anybody do it myself. But if you're sending your dog across a pond, you know, he's got to swim 300 yards to the far shore, but there's a point and you want him to get on the point and then sit on the point when you blow your whistle to sit, and then cast off of the point and go back to the far shore and pick up a bird. You're not going to be able to do that kind of training without introducing the electronic collar. You're not going to be able to do that kind of training without for land work either. So, but not every dog needs to be trained with an electronic collar. The dogs that I get called about, when the people they didn't want to screw their dog up, so they didn't do anything, and the dogs didn't learn, and they're just wild and pretty much feral. Those dogs, I specialize in helping people get control and train with the electronic collar. But there are amazing agility trainers that take border collies, and they do all this hard work when the puppies are really tiny little, and they continue to do all the hard work, and they continue to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and they never have to use an electronic collar but it's a lot of work, and they know what they're doing because they've learned after, you know, maybe 8 dogs. By the time they get their 8th dog, you know, 40 years later, they're pretty good trainers, and they're probably, you know, they probably really earned their stripes. And so each dog they get is going to be better. Each dog that I put through the trained retrieve process, years ago, probably 10 years ago, I started saying to my husband, oh my gosh, this dog was so easy to get through the trained retrieve. He just picks everything up. And then the next dog, I'd say the same thing, and I'd be even more impressed with the next dog. And all of a sudden I realized it was because I was getting better. It's not the dogs, it's because I am getting better. I have more confidence. I know what to expect. I know when I do this, this is going to happen. So I talk a lot about faith in your training. If you haven't trained a lot of dogs, then you have to rely on what other people say, and you have to believe. So whatever you believe your dog can or cannot do, you're going to be right. Your dog can do amazing things, amazing, incredible things, if you do the work and if you believe that it can be done. So, any more questions? If not, I'm going to close this down because it's been about an hour. All right, guys, thank you all so much for being here. And this is going to be available if you know anybody that needs any advice about raising puppies. Be sure to tell them to come on over here. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, and I'm going to try to put it on my website and probably on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But if you know anybody that needs some advice on they're thinking about getting a puppy, tell them to come on over here and look at this. And I'm going to do this again a couple more times this week, and hopefully more people will show up because it won't be Saturday night. And there'll be more questions because I love it when I get questions. Thank you all so much. And I'm going to stop this right now. And if you have any questions after the fact, I'll be here.